Well, Josh is getting that set up. First of all, I want to thank him for inviting me tonight. I think because of what he was talking about before, where he likes to talk, and sometimes people don't like to hear what he has to say, that means that, unfortunately, a lot of things that he does in our community go unnoticed by a certain population, and I think that everybody who is familiar with Josh and things that he does in our community has to recognize the fact that it would be a lot poorer community if we didn't have him in it. So definitely thank you for Josh being here and inviting me, and also thanks Josh, and also for kind of recognizing this is an important subject to talk about. I think we all like to talk about education, but the reason I titled my talk tonight is "You Don't Know What You Don't Know." Is because I started thinking about, like, if he asked me to come speak, and I thought, well, this is a little different for me because in my position I go and I talk and kind of train a lot of teachers, and so I deal in the educational industry with teachers, and so this is a little bit of a different crowd for me because a lot of people here are not really intimately familiar with education, on a daily basis. And what you do know about education, you kind of probably know from just what you know about being in school, right? And so, good or bad, for most of us, that hasn't really changed a lot. So what you knew about school is probably what most people know about school now. So tonight, when I say you don't know what you don't know, I've always kind of liked this phrase because when people ask me opinions about different things and it's kind of out of my league. The first thing is, like, you kind of want to ask questions about what it is that they're talking about, but a lot of times you don't even know the right questions to ask. And so tonight, really what I want to talk about was just the ability to share ideas, and that's another thing I want to applaud Josh for is in asking me to come here. I might be presenting some ideas that some of you are not familiar with yet or haven't heard before. In education, there's a lot of ideas that are floating around out there that have been kind of out there for a long time, including from the psychological point of view, from the learning theory point of view, that we've kind of in education not really paid much attention to when we probably should have been paying more attention to them. So I'm going to present some of those things to you tonight, and I hope, if nothing else, you kind of leave here with more ideas about education and maybe some of the directions we should be going in education, a little bit different than maybe what you thought about before you came in here. So. I'm also going to probably be walking around because I can't stay behind that. And I wasn't thinking about holding the mic, but I'll be kind of pacing a little bit here and there. So really the first thing I want to talk about tonight is the difference between what I would call education and learning. So most of us are kind of using these things interchangeably, meaning, when we talk about education, we think about learning. When we think about learning, we think about education. When in reality, I think those two things are actually, unfortunately, completely different. So when we talk about education, we're talking about the educational system, right? In fact, we even refer to it as an educational system. We talk about getting an education, or somebody paying for an education, or we talk about it as a thing. And in reality, what we really should be talking about is learning. So the traditional model of education is that we come in kindergarten, and then the thought is that we progress up this kind of like nice straight linear line from the time that we're in kindergarten up to the time we're in 12th grade, and then we get a diploma and we go on to do whatever else that we're going to do. When in reality, what we really should be talking about is learning, which looks a little bit more like this, right? So we're born, and then all along this path, we're taking all these things and these life experiences, and we're taking them, and we're actually learning things that we take, and it becomes part of us. And it looks more like this, right? We go forward, we go sideways, sometimes we go backward, and then we have to turn around and go forward. And so, really, that doesn't really end until we're dead, right? And so I hope, a lot of you are learning for a long time from here on out, but basically, that's the kind of pattern that I think we need to be looking at when we look at education. And so, if we look at these two things and we kind of overlay that in there, we can see that there's a disconnect between what education is and what learning truly is. So, what I've done here is I've kind of drawn these two red lines, and if I were to say what these two red lines represent, it would be what we call standards inside education. So if you're a teacher, you automatically know what these are. If you're not a teacher, basically what this is what we define as what we're going to teach inside our school system. And you can see that it's a pretty narrow path, right? So when we're in kindergarten, we're going to learn certain things. When we're in first grade, we learn certain things. And so this is kind of what that looks like. And so what I believe really we should kind of start to look at is what's in between these two red lines. which is what I would call authentic learning experiences. So you can see the differences between the, I guess you would say, the amount of experiences that you can have between the one on the left and the one on the right. The one on the left is much more narrow, right? So we could say, well, okay, so what? What's the problem with this? Well, I'm sure probably a lot of you have experienced this, but if you haven't, you know, the narrower the focus you get, the more you exclude, right? The more people you exclude from that focus. So as we get narrower in what we're going to teach inside our school systems, the more people we're going to exclude from that. So especially as we start to go where school systems have focused more on the two main subjects, which would be English and math, the more we exclude students who excel in those other areas and therefore alienate them from what they can truly learn inside a school system. Okay? So that's why it's important. So what I'm trying to show you tonight is maybe some ways that we can take the left side and move it more into the right side, right? Because if we really think about this, that line can fit inside those red lines there as well, right? We can teach kids what's inside the standards, but if we do it within what's inside what we call authentic learning experiences, it's going to be a different experience for that student, right? All right, so I didn't draw this, although this would look like my drawing if I tried to draw it. We've all heard the expression, you know, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, right? And so this is really true. If you're a teacher, you know that this is true for students. Well, it's always been true for students, but it's really, I think, even more true for a lot of students today because there's more and more water, right? And what I mean by that is when they come to the school, it used to be the only place to get water was at school, right? If you needed to know something, the teacher's the one who had the information. And now, water's everywhere, right? I mean, I can reach inside my pocket and tell you anything I want to know or anything you want to know because it's on my phone. So when the kids come to school, they come in and they're swimming around in a bunch of water, but they don't want to drink it because it's not what they want to drink. And they already had plenty of water when they were home before they got there, right? So again, I think this holds true. As a learner, right, I can't make you learn something. You have to want to know and you have to want to learn, or else you're not going to drink that water, okay? So as teachers, we've got to learn to do something with that. So what is it that we do? Well, I don't know if any of you are familiar with a guy named Daniel Pink, but he wrote a book called Drive, and it was really an exploration into a lot of psychology about what makes us tick as people, right? Not just learners, but really actually more specifically the business world. And what would make you what is called a type I, which means intrinsic motivation. What drives us internally? And what he's found, not through the research he's done, but research that has always been there, he just kind of gathered is that in order to get us truly engaged, whether it be in the workplace or whether it be in school, that has to come from an internal motivation, something that comes from inside us, right? And in order to do that, in order to be engaged, we have to have three things. We have to have autonomy, mastery, and purpose, okay? And so I can talk about the other two, but the one I'm going to focus on today is autonomy, right? And so the idea that whatever we're going to do, it has to come from us, and we have to feel like that we have the right to do what we want to do and choose what we want to choose, okay? And if we can get into that little sweet spot there, right? A Venn diagram, for those of you who are teachers, you know what that is. That equals engagement. And more specifically, engagement is when people truly, truly learn. And so in order to do this, right, what we're really asking teachers to do is we have to be the salt. I stole that from my minister, actually, my preacher. He was talking about this in church about when you're trying to, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. But you can be the salt in the horse's mouth, right, to make him thirsty. So we have to be salt in the learner's mouths. We have to want them to learn. And if we can't do that, it's not going to happen. So I'm going to talk a little bit about autonomy. So it says, to encourage intrinsic motivation, this comes directly from Daniel Pink, and the high performance it enables, people need autonomy over, right? So people need autonomy over task, what they do, time, when they do it, team, who they do it with, and technique, how they do it, right? So think about that for just a second, and then think about this. Students are people. Why do we treat them differently? I mean, they're a person just like you and I. They may be a younger person, but they're the same. If we want to encourage students to have intrinsic, right? Now, I don't know about what your experience was in school, but I'm going to guess if you were to go down that list, it's exactly the opposite of all those things, right? We tell kids what they're going to do. We tell them when they're going to do it. We tell them who they're going to do it with. And then we tell them also how they're going to do it, right? So every teacher who's been in the classroom, at some point, probably especially math teachers or they've heard, well, I got the right answer, why do I have to do it this way? Right? There's no good answer for that question for them. Well, because I said that you have to get it that way, or you're supposed to know that you've got to do it this direction. You know, what we're doing here, and when we're doing this to students, is taking away their ability to problem solve, right? And the things that we want them to do, we're taking that away from them because we're giving them exact steps that they need to follow to do something, right? And we're going to end up in a bad situation. While we're on it, can we talk for just a second about what we're doing to teachers? We're also taking away what they do, when they do it, who they do it with, and how they do it. We're doing that as well. So, you know, when you want motivated people, that can't work either. All right? So, this is my favorite part because I think this actually worked out. I was afraid this might not. But when you guys came in, there was a fishbowl out there, and it said, like, write down something that you know a lot about or you've learned a lot about. And so I'm going to read some of these because I find them interesting. This first one, that's not my favorite, this is a good one. Cats, fairness, kids, quilting, horses, Jesus, insurance, we all know that, gardening, this is my favorite, the 1961 New York Yankees. Not gonna, if you want to claim that one, you can. Oh, there you go, there it is. Now, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm guessing none of those were things you learned in school, right? Because those are the things that you truly and deeply care about. Those are the things that you actually learn, right? Those are the things that you learn. And if I were to say, raise your hands if you can tell me the quadratic formula, or you were, you know, most of you, right? As I was running through this in my head, I knew the list was going to go with raise your hand. But what I'm saying is, you're not truly deeply learning anything when you are not intrinsically driven to do it, right? And now, if you know those things, it's because more than likely you're using them in your adult life after you exited school, right? So, just one other thing that I want to say about this. I kind of got to thinking about this, and so I thought, you know, I have a daughter, she's in 3rd grade. I'm going to ask her this question. Tell me something that you know a lot about. So I was waiting for this. I was like, her and I are home together now because her mom's at Washington, D.C. with the oldest, and so it's just her and I. And I was like, all right, tell me something you know a lot about. She says, she's thinking for a little bit. She says, Greek gods. And I was like, okay. Well, she's into the Rick Riordan series, and she's been reading that. I said, okay, that's good. You do know a lot about that. I said, well, all right, well, just tell me one more thing. And so then she's kind of getting to that age where she's reverting into the kind of school mode. So she says reading. And I said, okay, that's not really something you know about. That's something you can really do well. So just maybe throw out one more thing. She says vocabulary. And I said, okay, that's good. I said, that's something that you kind of learn in school, right? And keep in mind, I'm not prompting her on this at all, but she says, well, no, I mean, I'm getting my vocabulary from books that I'm reading. It's not really from something that I learned in school because I don't really, those words aren't, I'm reading these and I need to know what they are so I can relate them to something else that I'm reading, okay? So, and this was today, this was today. And so every kid that's in school right now probably feels like that in some way, right? There are things that, like we have this school life, kids have this school life, and then they have, I think I messed it up. You have this school life, and then you have this life outside of school where you feel like you're truly learning things that matter to you. And at some point, I planned that, I perfectly did this. We want those two things to unite, right? Because if we look over here on the right-hand side, we have education. If we look on the left-hand side, we have learning. And those are intentionally big and small for a reason. Education is an institution, right? It's a system. And so it's really big in all of our lives. It's a cultural thing. And in order for us to get learning there, we have to find a place where we can really get those two things together. And so there has to be a movement to try to have these two things collide to where we get to that aha moment, right? Because we can still teach standards. I mean, I'm not that crazy that I'm just saying we should let kids do whatever they want in school and whatever they want to learn, they can learn. I mean, I realize that there has to be things that we want them to learn. But inside that bigger scope of that red thing, which is authentic learning experiences, they can still get to the place where we want them to learn, right? And who knows, like, we are doing them a disservice in the fact that some kid out there is never going to know whether they want to be a chef or whether they want to work in the building trades or whether they want to work in all these different fields that we're kind of narrowing down because we're pushing them to the outer boundaries, right? We can get to the aha, we just have to kind of like look at it in a different way. Okay? So just real quickly, I'm going to talk about a kid who was in one of my classes. His name's Dylan. And I kind of came about some of these theories through lots of different things, but just from my experience in the classroom, and I taught 7th grade language arts, and I did that here at Switzerland County. And I was in a really lucky position because I actually had students a little bit longer than the traditional school day. I had them for 2 periods a day. And so it gave me a little more freedom than other teachers might have. And I actually started a thing called Genius Hour. It wasn't my idea, it's not, I don't profess it to be, but it came from Google's concept. And Google as a company, the search engine, but they do lots and lots of things. I'm pretty sure everybody's heard of Google. But one of their company policies is that they have what's called 20% time, which allows their employees that when they're at work, even while they're getting paid, they have 20% of their time where they're allowed to kind of just pursue whatever they feel is what they could really do something to advance Google. And that's a really big thing for intrinsic motivation. It's giving them autonomy to work on projects. This is where Gmail came from. This is where a lot of Google's really important ideas have kind of centered. And so, along with Dan Pink and some others, they've kind of taken this idea and pushed it towards the educational realm. And so I took basically one day out of every week where we would go to a computer lab, we would go to some space where the students were able to go and participate in whatever it is that they felt like they wanted to pursue. So when I say whatever it is that they wanted to pursue, I really literally let them pursue whatever they wanted to learn about, as long as they operated in the parameters of where they set goals for themselves, they were able to kind of show me that they were progressing in what they were learning. And so I'm going to cut this a little shorter here, but Dylan was a kid who came into my class and he was what you would consider basically like an average student, maybe even a little below average, maybe in the C- range. And teaching language arts with a 7th grade boy, that's not unusual because most of them don't really care too much about reading poetry and writing and all that kind of stuff. They'd rather be out doing other stuff. But he was really, really quiet. I mean, you wouldn't say that he was disliked. Kids liked him. He was just kind of kept to himself. So we started this Genius Hour, and we brought them all in. I kind of gave them the parameters, and lots of kids did really, really great stuff. I mean, you want to talk to me about it later, I can give you examples. But Dylan was one that really stuck with me because I had written a grant to get a couple MacBooks. And of those of you who know MacBooks, GarageBand is one of the really important, driving pieces of software on there. There's lots of things that you can do with GarageBand. And Dylan was a band student, but again, even when you're in band, we don't really have autonomy in band, right? We come in, we have to play the Star Spangled Banner, and we have to play the pep song, and we don't really get to go in there and jam, right? Well, Dylan was musical, but he never really had an outlet for that because he was playing saxophone. So he comes in and he grabs a MacBook and he has his headphones and he goes over in the corner and he just goes to work. And really, I never heard much from the kid. Every day we go in there in the period, he's kind of keeping it to himself. I'm kind of looking over his shoulder, making sure he's not cruising YouTube, and he's working every time. So finally, after about a few weeks, he comes and he says, all right, well, I'm ready to kind of show you what I have, and here's my stuff. And so he plays me this rap song, right? And, I'm sure even myself, I'm too old to really like rap all that much. So I was kind of, all right, well, let's hear this thing. And it was really, really impressive. Now, I'm not a record producer, so I don't want to be totally crap, but I think it was good, right? Let's put it this way. After I heard it, I went home like singing the song in my head, and I was like, man, that kind of stuck. I don't know. I'm thinking, all right, he's going to thank me in his Grammy speech. It's going to be great. But it was really, really good. But the thing about it that really started to hit home with me was not what he produced, because he went on and he finished this piece, he did another piece, he started working on some other stuff. It was his demeanor and his attitude in my classroom. Completely changed. Because what happened was other kids, like, what are you doing? And then he would play it for him, and he would feedback, and they're like, oh, this is really cool. And so then what happened was his performance in my class improved, not just in Genius Hour, but through all the rest of the stuff that was going on. He found a trust in me allowing him to do what he wanted to do, but also he found more of a reason to be giving more effort in the rest of his work. So by the time he had exited my class, he was a high B+, A- student. He started to improve the rest of his writing because he got a real confidence in his ability to write. Now, your average everyday language teacher would look at a rap song and say, that's not writing, right? But it is. It's rhyme, it's meter, it's all these other things, but then he got also involved in saying, well, if I can write this, then I can write a short story, right? So there's all these things that we can provide to students to give them confidence in themselves. All right. So the final thing before I want to move on from this is the last day of school. Let's tell you what a switch he had in his personality. There was an end of the day dance, and the kids were just on him. Hey, you got to go. Like we had a DJ, and they're all like, hey, go do your rap song on stage. Hey, do your rap song on stage. He actually brought his song. DJ plugged it in. He got on stage and performed his rap song in front of the whole school. Right? It would have never happened. That would have never happened on day one. But by the time he exited, he felt like he was a different person, right? All because we gave him an outlet for something he could do creative. So that's an example, and I think it's something that we can all, strive to be in education. And then I'm going to this is about a 2.5 minute trailer. And before we go into this, I just want to kind of make a point of what I'm trying to make here, is that this is an example of somebody who wasn't an educator, somebody who was a designer who wanted to get into the field of education. And the community that you're going to see in this film, actually this little clip, is very much like Switzerland County. And these people decided that whatever they were doing obviously wasn't working. You know, there was still a lot of poverty, there was still a lot of people without jobs, there was still a lot of people who didn't care much about education. And so they decided that at some point we got to do something. And they decided that at this point they were going to bring in and create this program called Project H. And so I'm going to show this to you, and then I'm going to just make a couple comments, and then I'm going to make my final point, which is, if you leave here with anything tonight, whether you agree or disagree with what I've said, there's a lot of things that come in education, including federal standards, federal rules, federal laws, state standards, state rules, state laws. But despite all that, education still is a local thing. There's lots of decisions that can be made locally. And how we make those decisions and what we make those decisions and what we do with our money is our choice. And the people who are sitting here, some of those people can help with those decisions. Some of those people can make this, differences. And even if it's not your school board member, if it's not your representative, if it's a teacher that you know, tell them that you saw something that was interesting. Tell them that you saw and you would like to see them move in a direction that's more positive for the students. Okay, so we're going to play this real quick. If this works, I don't know if this works. Nope.
Bertie County is a prime example in the demise of rural America.
I'm not leaving because I want to leave. I'm leaving because there's nothing to keep me here.
There's not a whole lot of opportunities for our kids here.
When in school, I hated it. My dad hated it. My granddaddy hated it. I'm carrying on a tradition.
We have kids coming through that door every minute. What if you could bring back shop class, but orient the projects around things that the community needed?
So here's the challenge.
We have 1 full year to build a community project.
Is this what we're gonna be doing all year? Give me a 0. You gotta be out your mind.
All right, let's get to work.
It's not a typical class. We don't have a desk. It's crazy.
What I hope to see in 16 weeks is that little mama full size.
We're making something for retirement Wednesday, so we have to make it right.
We're racing the clock.
Throw that stuff away. Their nails sticking up. All I'm asking is that you do a halfway decent job.
That's not
The pressure's on now.
our offered salaries have been taken off the table.
Bertie County has never paid him a dime.
We're at our absolute
discussion.
Everything just fell apart.
Because it doesn't mean perfect.
We just decided that something had to give.
It's bigger than the students. It's bigger than their education. At this point, it's the talents.
They're trying to teach us how to look outside the box.
Why? Why is something the way it is?
Make something better out of everything.
Are the things you're doing making a difference in anyone's lives?
I think it's critical that people rally around this thing.
I just want these kids to be excited about coming to school every day.
It's just amazing.
You always need to keep putting ideas together to make a better one.
I've never been a part of something so big.
Breakthrough moments happen so rarely that half the time you think you're just doing a lousy job as a teacher. But when it does happen, I mean, it just floors you.
Farmers market is the beginning. To stand here and look around, it's just amazing. It really was a blessing. All of those guys.
I'm so proud of them.
This is something that really can transform lives.
It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and it happened to us.
So that's a good example of someone and some set of people. See, I'm full of Josh and play that again, but change happens locally, right? So that's a set of people who decided that it was time to make a change. And if you'll notice that, well, there was one other piece in there that I didn't hit on, but I could have, which was purpose, right? Those kids did something for their community, which was another important part of what that program did. So it took real life learning experiences and connected to something that gave them a purpose. And it also gave them the autonomy and the ability to master whatever it is they were doing. And so, was it easy? No, obviously not. And that's the reason that a lot of times change doesn't occur, because it's not very easy. But if I were to leave you just one thing, I would hope that you understand that every single one of you, no matter what your age, no matter whether you have children in school, no matter whether you're on the school board, no matter whether you're a representative, you have the ability to kind of influence what's going to happen with education. So again, thank you to Josh, thank you guys for listening, and if you have any questions, please feel free to catch me or contact me. I'll be glad to answer.